Some people believe impossible things about themselves. They look at what they are and they see something that isn't there yet. They act like they've already become the person they're trying to be. They speak with certainty about futures that don't exist. And sometimes they're right. The impossible thing happens. The delusion becomes reality, and we call them visionaries. But other people do the exact same thing. They believe impossible things. They act with the same certainty. They speak about the same futures. And they fail. They crash. They lose everything. And we call them delusional, arrogant, out of touch with reality. Here's what I can't figure out. The belief was the same. The certainty was the same. The gap between who they were and who they claimed to be was the same. So what was the difference? I keep coming back to this question because I think it matters. Not in a self-help way, not in a manifest your dreams way, but in a real way, a philosophical way. What separates the people who believe in themselves irrationally and succeed from the people who believe in themselves irrationally and destroy their lives? Is it luck? Is it timing? Is it something about the quality of the delusion itself? I don't have a clean answer, but I want to explore it with you. Let's start with something that bothers me. Be realistic. You've heard this. Everyone has. It's the advice people give when they think you're reaching too far, when your goals seem too big for who you currently are, when there's a gap between your ambition and your credentials. Be realistic. Know your limits. Don't get ahead of yourself. And on some level, this makes sense. There's wisdom in knowing what you can and can't do. There's value in understanding your actual position in the world. But here's what bothers me. What does realistic actually mean? When someone tells you to be realistic, what they usually mean is, accept the limits that other people have accepted. Expect results similar to what people like you have gotten before. Don't assume you're special. And that sounds reasonable until you think about it for more than a minute, because everything that exists today was unrealistic before it existed. The airplane was unrealistic. For most of human history, the idea that humans could fly was not just ambitious, it was insane. People who believed it were mocked, dismissed, told to be realistic. The internet was unrealistic. The idea that every person on Earth could be connected through invisible signals, sharing information instantly, would have sounded like science fiction 50 years ago. Every company that changed an industry started as an unrealistic idea. Every revolution began with people who refused to accept what was realistic at the time. So when someone tells you to be realistic, they're really telling you to accept the world as it was defined by people who came before you, to operate within limits that were drawn by others, to expect only what has already been proven possible. But the people who actually change things, who build things that didn't exist, who become something unprecedented, they weren't realistic. They couldn't be. By definition, what they were trying to do had never been done. Now, I'm not saying that every unrealistic belief is valid. That's obviously not true. Most unrealistic beliefs are just wrong. Most people who think they're going to revolutionize an industry are going to fail. But I am saying that be realistic is not the neutral, wise advice it pretends to be. It's a bias toward the status quo, and sometimes the status quo is wrong. The question isn't whether to be realistic. The question is, Which unrealistic beliefs are worth holding? There's something happening in your brain right now that you're not aware of. Your brain is receiving millions of pieces of information from the world around you. Sounds, lights, sensations, data points flooding in from everywhere. But you're not conscious of most of it. You can't be. There's too much. If you were aware of everything your senses were picking up, you'd be overwhelmed. You couldn't function. So your brain filters. It decides what gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets ignored. There's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system, the RAS. And one of its jobs is to filter information based on what it thinks is relevant to you. Here's a simple example. You decide you want to buy a red car. Suddenly, you start seeing red cars everywhere. They're on every street, in every parking lot. You can't stop noticing them. But here's the thing. Those red cars were always there. They were there yesterday and the day before. You just didn't see them because your brain wasn't filtering for them. The moment you decided red cars mattered to you, your RAS started flagging them, bringing them to your attention, making them visible in a way they weren't before. This is not magic. This is just how attention works. But think about what this means for someone trying to achieve something. Two people walk into the same networking event, same room, same people, same opportunities available. The first person believes they don't belong there. They're convinced they're not good enough, not successful enough, not interesting enough. What does their RAS filter for? Confirmation. They notice every skeptical glance, every person who seems too busy to talk, every small rejection. They leave thinking, see, I knew I didn't belong. The second person believes they have something valuable to offer. They're not arrogant, just confident. What does their RAS filter for? Opportunity. They notice the person who seems open to conversation, the connection that could be useful, the opening that the first person walked right past. They leave thinking, that went well. I made some good connections. Same event, same reality, but two completely different experiences because of two different filters. If your brain filters information based on what it thinks is relevant, and if what it thinks is relevant is shaped by your beliefs and expectations, then your beliefs literally shape what you perceive. You don't see the world as it is. You see the world as you are. And here's where it gets interesting. What you notice affects what you do. If you notice obstacles, you hesitate. If you notice opportunities, you act. Over time, these small differences in perception lead to massive differences in behavior. And behavior is what actually creates outcomes. There's a feedback loop here. Belief shapes perception. Perception shapes action. Action shapes outcome. Outcome reinforces belief. The person who believes they'll succeed sees more opportunities, takes more actions, and increases their chances of actually succeeding. The success then reinforces the belief, which strengthens the filter, which creates more success. The person who believes they'll fail sees more obstacles, takes fewer risks, and increases their chances of actually failing. The failure reinforces the belief, strengthens the filter, and creates more failure. Both of them would tell you they're just being realistic. They're just seeing the world as it is. But they're not. They're seeing the world through their filters, and their filters are creating self-fulfilling prophecies. This is the first piece of the puzzle. Your beliefs aren't just opinions about reality. They're instructions to your brain about what to look for, and what you look for shapes what you find. Nietzsche understood something about this that I think most people miss. Nietzsche is often misunderstood. People quote him out of context, use him to justify things he would have hated. But there's a thread in his work that's relevant here. He wrote about what he called the will to power. And most people hear that phrase and think he's talking about domination, about conquering others, about some kind of aggressive strength. But that's not really what he meant. The will to power for Nietzsche was about the drive to create, to overcome, to become more than what you currently are. It wasn't about power over others. It was about power over yourself, the power to shape who you're becoming. Nietzsche looked at most people and saw something sad. He saw people accepting values they didn't choose, living lives designed by others, never questioning whether the realistic limits they accepted were actually real or just inherited. He called this herd mentality, going along with what everyone else believes because questioning it is uncomfortable, accepting the map of reality that was handed to you without ever checking if the map is accurate. The people he admired were different. They created their own values. They looked at the world not as it was, but as it could be. They had the courage to believe in things that didn't exist yet. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." This gets at something important. The person who believes, deeply believes, in where they're going can endure things that would break someone without that belief. The hardship doesn't feel the same when it's in service of something you're certain about. And here's the uncomfortable part. It might not matter whether the belief is true in some objective sense. What matters is whether the belief functions, whether it produces the energy, the persistence, the willingness to suffer that's required to achieve something difficult. William James, the philosopher, called this pragmatism, the idea that truth isn't just about correspondence to facts. It's about what works. A belief is true if believing it produces good outcomes. By this standard, a delusional confidence that makes you work harder, persist longer, and ultimately succeed was true. Not because it was accurate when you first believed it, but because believing it made it accurate. This is strange logic. It feels like cheating somehow. But I'm not sure it's wrong. There's another dimension to this that goes beyond just your own perception. It's about how your belief affects other people. Steve Jobs had this quality that people who worked with him described as a reality distortion field. The term was half joking, but it pointed at something real. Jobs would tell his engineers that something was possible in a timeline they knew was impossible. He would look at them with complete certainty and say it could be done, and they would know rationally that he was wrong. But here's the strange part. They would often do it anyway. They would achieve the thing they knew was impossible. Not because Jobs was right about the physics or the engineering, but because his certainty somehow made them doubt their own doubt. When someone stands in front of you with absolute conviction, with zero uncertainty, something happens in your brain. Some part of you wonders, maybe they know something I don't. Maybe my sense of what's possible is the thing that's wrong. Human beings crave certainty. Most of us walk around full of doubt about our abilities, our decisions, our futures. And when someone shows up without that doubt, with a clarity that seems almost unnatural, it's magnetic. This is how leaders are born. Not always the most qualified person, not always the smartest, but often the most certain. The person who doesn't doubt themselves makes it hard for others to doubt them. Is this manipulation? Maybe. Is it delusion? Possibly. Is it effective? Undeniably. And here's what's interesting. When Jobs' certainty made his engineers achieve the impossible, was he still wrong? The thing got done. The reality he described came into existence. His delusion became the truth through the force of his belief. There's something almost quantum about this. Like the act of observation changes the outcome. Like certainty itself is a variable that affects what's possible. I don't know how far to push this idea. Obviously, you can't just believe hard enough and make anything happen. There are limits. Physics exists. Reality pushes back. But within the range of human achievement, within the domain of what people can do when they really commit, the limits might be less fixed than we assume. And someone's certainty, their refusal to accept those limits, might actually expand what's possible. Muhammad Ali understood this better than almost anyone. Before he was the greatest, before he had the record to prove it, he was already calling himself the greatest. In interviews, in press conferences, to anyone who would listen. I am the greatest. I said that even before I knew I was. People thought he was arrogant, obnoxious, delusional even. Who was this young fighter making claims he couldn't back up? But here's what Ali understood that his critics didn't. He wasn't just talking to them. He was talking to himself. He was building the identity before he had the evidence. He was living as if the thing he wanted to become was already true. And he was talking to his opponents. Every time he declared himself the greatest, every time he predicted the round he would win in, he was planting doubt in their minds. If this man is so certain, maybe he knows something. The confidence wasn't separate from the training. Ali worked relentlessly. The delusion wasn't a substitute for preparation. It was fuel for it. He woke up at 4 a.m. and ran because he believed he was the greatest, and the greatest doesn't sleep in. He trained harder than anyone because the greatest can't be outworked. The belief demanded action, consistent with the belief. This is the part that most people miss when they talk about confidence. It's not about believing you're great and then sitting back, waiting for greatness to arrive. That's not confidence, that's fantasy. Real confidence, the kind that changes outcomes, is belief that compels action. You believe you're going to succeed, so you work like someone who's going to succeed. You believe you're the best, so you train like the best. The belief creates the behavior. The behavior creates the result. The result validates the belief. It's a loop, and it can be entered at any point. You can wait for results to give you confidence, or you can start with confidence and let it generate the results. Ali chose to start with confidence, and history proved him right. But would we be telling this story if he had lost? If the confidence had been the same, but the outcomes different? That's the question I can't escape. I need to talk about the shadow side of this, because it would be dishonest not to. For every Steve Jobs who bent reality, There are thousands of people who believe just as strongly and broke themselves against the world. For every Ali who declared himself the greatest and became it, there are countless fighters who made the same declaration and were proven painfully wrong. The graveyards of business are full of entrepreneurs who had unshakable confidence in ideas that didn't work, who refused to accept feedback, who mistook stubbornness for vision, who bet everything on a belief that turned out to be wrong. I think about this a lot because the self-help version of this idea, the just believe in yourself version, is dangerous. It ignores the bodies. So what's the difference? What separates the confidence that creates from the confidence that destroys? I've thought about this a lot, and I think it comes down to one thing: delusion as fuel versus delusion as map. Let me explain what I mean. The people who succeed use their irrational confidence as fuel. It gives them energy. It makes them work harder. It helps them persist through setbacks that would stop a more realistic person. It gets them out of bed when things are hard. It keeps them going when everyone else would quit. But they don't use delusion as their map. They use data. They adjust based on feedback. They're willing to be wrong about tactics while remaining certain about the destination. The destination is fixed. The path is flexible. They say, I will build something great, and never waver on that. But they also say, this specific approach isn't working. Let me try something else. The confidence fuels the work, but it doesn't blind them to reality. The people who destroy themselves use delusion as both fuel and map. They believe so strongly that they stop listening. They interpret every failure as the world being wrong, not them. They can't adjust because adjusting would mean doubting, and they've made doubt impossible. They become certain not just about the destination, but about the path. And when the path leads off a cliff, they walk off it confidently. There's a test you can apply to yourself. Can you hear feedback? When someone tells you something isn't working, can you actually consider it? Can you sit with the possibility that they might be right? Or does your certainty make you immune to information that contradicts your belief? Do you seek out people who will tell you the truth? Or have you surrounded yourself with people who only confirm what you already believe? When something fails, what's your first instinct? To examine what you might have done wrong, or to blame external factors? If you can't hear feedback, if you can't update your approach based on reality, if you dismiss every criticism as jealousy or ignorance, your confidence has become a prison. You're not a visionary. You're just someone who's going to crash very confidently. The Greeks called this hubris, the arrogance that precedes the fall, the confidence that blinds you to the cliff you're walking toward. Icarus flew too close to the sun, not because he believed he could fly. He could fly. The wings worked. He fell because he stopped respecting limits that were actually real. His confidence made him ignore the one constraint that mattered. There are always constraints that matter. The question is which ones. The visionary is someone who correctly identifies which limits are real and which are just accepted, who pushes against the arbitrary constraints while respecting the actual ones. The fool is someone who can't tell the difference, who pushes against everything, including the things that will kill them. And here's the hard truth. You can't always tell which one you are until after the fact. The visionary and the fool feel the same from the inside. The certainty is identical. Only the outcome reveals which was which. So where does this leave us? I've been circling this question for a while now, and I don't have a clean answer. Maybe that's honest. Maybe clean answers are what self-help books sell, and reality is messier. But here's what I've come to think. The advice to be realistic is not neutral. It's a bias toward limits that may or may not be real. Following it guarantees you'll never exceed what's already been done. The advice to believe in yourself is not complete. Belief without action is fantasy. And belief that can't hear feedback becomes delusion that destroys. What seems to work is something in between, something harder to articulate, a confidence that's irrational enough to attempt what others won't, but grounded enough to adjust when reality pushes back, a belief in the destination that's unshakable, but a willingness to change the route constantly, certainty about who you're becoming, humility about how you're going to get there. This is a tension, not a formula. You have to hold both things at once. The arrogance to believe you can do what hasn't been done, and the humility to know you don't yet know how. Most people collapse the tension. They either accept limits and never try, or they reject all limits and crash. The people who actually build something hold the tension. They're humble and arrogant at the same time, certain and flexible, delusional about the vision, pragmatic about the execution. Here's what I keep coming back to. The difference between a visionary and a delusional person is the outcome. That's it. That's the only difference. Before the outcome, they look the same. They sound the same. They have the same irrational certainty, the same disregard for what's realistic, the same willingness to bet on themselves when the odds seem against them. We only call one of them a visionary because they succeeded. We only call the other delusional because they failed. This is uncomfortable. It means you can't know in advance which one you are. You can do everything right, believe the right way, work the right amount, and still fail, because there are factors outside your control: timing, luck, circumstances. But here's the thing. If you accept that uncertainty, if you understand that you might fail despite doing everything right, and you still choose to believe, that's something. Not because the belief is magic, but because the alternative is worse. The alternative is accepting limits that might not be real, playing small because you're afraid of being wrong, never finding out what you are actually capable of. I'd rather believe and fail than never believe and never know. At least the person who believes and fails learns something. They tested the limits. They found out where reality actually pushes back, not where other people assumed it would. The person who never believes learns nothing. They just inherit the limits of everyone who came before them and pass those limits on. So if you're watching this and wondering whether you should believe in something bigger than your current reality, I can't tell you yes or no. I don't know your situation. I don't know whether your vision is possible or fantasy. But I can tell you this. The question isn't whether your belief is realistic. That question is rigged. Realistic is just a word for what's already been done. The question is whether your belief makes you act, whether it compels you to work, whether it gives you energy to persist when things get hard. If your confidence makes you sit back and wait for the universe to deliver, it's not confidence, it's entitlement, and it will destroy you. If your confidence makes you work harder than you would have otherwise, take risks you wouldn't have taken, persist through failures that would have stopped you, then it's useful. Regardless of whether it's realistic, the only delusion worth having is the one that demands everything from you. That won't let you rest. That makes you earn the future it promises. And even then, you might fail. The outcome isn't guaranteed. Reality gets a vote, but at least you'll have lived like someone who believed they could matter, like someone who refused to accept the limits they were given, like someone who, for a while at least, bent their will towards something that didn't exist yet and tried to make it real. That's not nothing. That might be everything. Nietzsche, near the end of his productive life, wrote something that I think about often. He said that the highest form of human being is the one who can create values, not just accept them, who can look at the world and say, "This is not enough. I will make something more." This requires a kind of madness, a departure from what everyone else accepts, a willingness to be wrong, to be mocked, to be alone in your belief. But it's also the only way anything new enters the world. Every meaningful thing that exists was once just a belief in someone's mind. A delusion, if you want to call it that. Something that wasn't real yet, but that someone was certain would become real. And then, through work and will, and perhaps some luck, it did. That's the strange alchemy of confidence. It's not sufficient for success, but it might be necessary. The belief doesn't guarantee the outcome, but the absence of belief might guarantee failure. So choose your delusion carefully. Make it one that demands action, that can survive feedback without breaking, that serves as fuel, not as map. And then commit to it with everything you have. Not because you're certain to succeed, you're not, but because the alternative is accepting a world you didn't choose and limits you didn't test. And that seems like the real delusion, believing that small is safe, that realistic is wise, that the boundaries you inherited are the boundaries that exist. Maybe the most irrational thing isn't believing too much in yourself. Maybe it's believing too little and never finding out what was actually possible.